Morning, Bitcoiners. Good morning. The sun is up. Bitcoin's running. I checked. We're good. Let's have our coffee, talk about the news. Lots going on. So I got to tell you, all that went on yesterday, all that's going on lately. I've never, and I mean it literally, I've never felt so close to viral Bitcoin awareness and everyone sort of opening their eyes to what it is we're doing. So today we're going to talk about just how good the FTX and the SBF thing is for Bitcoin, right? I mean, we couldn't have asked for a better situation. It's like the simulation is delivering us the exact ingredients to cook up a hyper-Bitcoinization feast for humanity, right? I'm going to tell you all about it today. But first, we got to talk about one of the most amazing, after this show, you got to go there. You got to go see this. I'm going to be there. I don't know if it's real or fake or what the heck's going on, but those journalists that Glenn Greenwald mentioned the other day that were tracking money, just citizen journalists tracking money to Ukraine and all this stuff and SBF and what's going on and check it out. Well, they're hosting a Spaces on Twitter this morning. And guess who their guest is going to be? It's Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden is doing his NFT drop there. And I mean, I don't know if it's real. They've been advertising it all morning. Hunter Biden has a video where he says he's going to be talking about it on Twitter Spaces. But again, I'm not sure it's a recent video. I don't know. But we all know that Hunter Biden has been selling NFTs and art and all this stuff, right? Now, if you didn't know this, art, so those of you out there who don't know my own history in Bitcoin, just a quick resume, because where I learned about Bitcoin was when I was working for the Senate Banking Committee in Canada, and I ran so I'm trained as a lawyer, and I was working as a lawyer on the committee at the time. And it was 2011, 2012, and I was doing a study on terrorism financing and money laundering. So what are the regimes that are in place to stop it? How does it work? What's going on? And all these things. And during that study, I learned about Bitcoin. So in 2013, I got that same committee to do a Bitcoin study and not, how is it used for financial crimes? Because we already knew all that stuff because we'd been studying it. We wanted to actually hear the positive things about Bitcoin. So it was a great study. Lots of people paid attention. I quit my work at the Senate in Canada after that to work exclusively in our industry. But what I learned from that study on terrorism financing was not just Bitcoin. I learned about the entire global regime for money laundering, terrorism financing, and what's going on with all that. It turns out it's a big scam. It doesn't work, right? FinCEN, FinTrack, FinCEN in the United States, FinTrack in Canada, FATF in Europe don't do anything. I mean, they don't catch anyone. It's as if there's no money laundering going on, right? Their whole plan is that $10,000 thing you sign when you fly into different countries and say, do you have cash on you? Is it worth $10,000? No. That's the whole plan. I'm not kidding. Every bank that has to file compliance reports, that's all they're saying. Do we have a $10,000 transaction? Yes, it was from this person, that person, da, 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 da. Right? So nothing else is looked at, and one of the most important ones. So when I did the study, and the Canadian Senate is a little different than the American Senate in the sense that it's less political, less partisan, and you can actually get substantive work done. In a sense, it's thought of as a think tank, and it's thought of as a less partisan house. Now it's probably more partisan. I don't work there anymore, so I don't know. But in my time, it was Democrats and Republicans, but we say conservative and liberal in Canada. And on this study anyway, on both the Bitcoin study and the terrorism finance study, it was unanimous agreement into what we were doing. And unanimous agreement in the study, both Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives, in the study that I did in 2011, 2012, were all angry at the anti-money laundering regime for being punitive to normal citizens, to not actually taking care of anything, and to turning a blind eye to the obvious avenues that were used for money laundering. And one of the most obvious is art, right? It's art. Any one of those trades you saw last year where there were NFTs selling for, there were NFTs selling for $500 million, $500 million, Regularly, art was selling in that scheme for 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 million dollars, right? Because it doesn't actually adhere to the money laundering, the anti-money laundering controls. It's exempt. And so suddenly Hunter Biden becomes an artist. Right? Suddenly he's an artist and he's selling this stuff and people are saying he's good. I saw the art. It's not terrible, right? It's not terrible, but where does the value come from, right? Well, the millions of dollars he's made in art so far, we don't know where the value comes from. We have no idea and no insight, right? But that gets us on to what we're actually talking about today, which is contrast, right? Contrast. So I named, and the whole point of this show is to contrast the commercial relationships that go into making dollars with the commercial relationships that go into making Bitcoin. And the point of the persuasion of this show is to contrast a Bitcoin standard with the petrodollar, Bitcoin standard with fiat, right? We're actually trying to contrast every day Saifedean's two books, right? The fiat standard contrasted with the Bitcoin standard. The whole point of this show is that we're actually in a relationship with these commercial relationships, right, to make dollars. And so therefore we're in a relationship with the dollar. And this show is all about the bad ends that those relationships end up producing, even if your intentions aren't bad, right? The literal spirit of the money influences and redirects all intentions and sort of gobbles it all up and alters it and changes it, right? So the whole point of this show is to use contrast in order to make the point that Bitcoin standard produces different results than the dollar, right? So I'm using everyday contrast in order to talk about all of this news. Well, yesterday was one of the greatest days in contrast we'll ever see. And so first of all, I'll just explain what the contrast principle is, right? It's a persuasion technique, it's an influence technique. And you can see right here how it works, right, in this visual. These two blue dots are the exact same size. Right? They were created out of the same stencil. And all I did to change the perception of them to you was change what's on the outside, right? So these black dots are obviously different size, right? Now the blue dots to most perception will seem, this one will look small and this one will look big. They're the same blue dot, right? So this is how contrast works in order to persuade and influence. When you put two things next to each other, the differences stick out. They'll always stick out, right? And that's kind of the theme we have today. So Ben Shapiro, first of all, had a really interesting Twitter thread as this SBF story goes viral. And here's what he said. SBF was hand in glove with every major Democrat and all major crypto regulators. They are planning on moving forward with his proposed legislation, even after it's clear he was a massive scam artist. Yet capitalism will be blamed rather than corporatism, of course. So that sort of echoes how we're feeling in the Bitcoin world, right? Like, we have nothing to do with this thing, yet people are saying, oh, Bitcoin this, Bitcoin scam, and whatnot. Shapiro goes on, more government oversight is the answer, cried all the people elected with SBF's cash, your cash. The story of SBF isn't just a Fire Festival doc. It's about his blue washing, massive donations to Democrats, associations with WEF, push for stakeholder capitalism in order to draw regulators that benefited him and to create associations that protected him. Right, so that's his take. But here's the contrast part, right? Here's the contrast part. He puts a bunch of these, the red flag meme that's all over Twitter, red flag, it's very dangerous, right? So here's what Ben Shapiro says. And these are a series of red flags that we're going to talk about. If they do a tech conference with Bill Clinton, red flag. If they wear gym shorts at public tech events, red flag. If they donate tens of millions of dollars to Dems, red flag. If they live in a polycule with their co-executives, red flag. If they have an amazing ESG rating, red flag. If the WEF loves them, World Economic Forum loves them, red flag, right? So let's just take Shapiro's model here of contrast and see what's going on in the world and see how it benefits Bitcoin, because there's a lot of stuff on the bone here. First of all, a bunch of people have been investigating how FTX and SBF lost all the money. And it's actually amazing, right? So, and it's a feeling that I had from the very start about who was going to lose money on this, right? My inkling right off the bat was, this is going to be investors. Because, when I was working at Kraken, one of the things I did at Kraken was market size and competitor size, right? So I would look at all the different data around Kraken's own competitors, like How many active users does Coinbase have? How many active users does this platform have? How many active users does, that's the kind of stuff you're looking at, right? And you're looking at how well you're performing and where you can maybe get a little more growth and things like that. That was my job. I was a strategist there, right? So I had sort of wide open field to think about things and strategize and scheme, right, in my own way, right? And what I saw from SBF was not a lot of users, right? I saw high-risk products, but right away I attributed their growth to their own financial success, right? They made a lot of money, which I knew about. I found SBF in 2018 on the BitMEX platform because I was looking for the top traders and there was a leaderboard. And I saw him right there and I asked him to speak at one of my events. I said, he had no exchange at the time. It was just Alameda Research. And I said, well, you're obviously doing really well. Why don't you come talk, right? And we'll see what's up. And he said, no, I can't do it. Blah, 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 blah. So never heard from him after that. And then FTX was launched, but I paid close attention to the user base and what was going on. It turns out I was mostly right. And now that we have some of this forensic auditing of what exactly happened, what it looks like. So this one is from Doug Colkett, and that's 0xDoug on Twitter. And the picture he creates here, and there's a few people that have substantiated it, looks like this. And the way he frames it is like this. At 3AC, we knew it went to losses on leveraged long positions. At Lehman, it went to bad mortgages. At Enron, it went to boondoggle mega projects. Some FTX money obviously went to seed rounds and bad or liquid projects. But as far as I can tell, nowhere near enough to explain the hole that destroyed it, right? So what he ends up doing is he looks in here and finds out that they were not great traders, right? They were losing a ton of money on the Alameda end, and that they were taking all these large deposits from corporate clients, from institutional clients, right? So yesterday we saw Ikigai and Travis Kling finished, right? Because they had been trading on that venue. They had left all deposits on there. And the way he ends up explaining it is that basically they were terrible traders. They were trying to attract deposits from these large institutional traders who were trading with them and winning every single time, right? So you'd come on the venue, they were getting picked off as far as price discovery, right? So we always noticed at Kraken which venue had the most volume, and then that venue would be the leading price discovery venue, which is usually Binance, right? We would always see that because of all the flow Binance had, the price was the most accurate, let's say, or the most up to date, and then people would arbitrage backwards off of Binance. So if the price was different, because they were discovering the new price quicker on Binance, if the price, let's say, was different on Kraken, then people would arbitrage between the two. And that's exactly what FTX was doing for years when they started. They were just doing cross arb between different venues. And now people were coming to their venue to do it, right? And they were getting picked off, apparently. FTX was just getting picked off because everyone was in there making money. And in a bull market, it was much easier. So it hid all of the problems. But then, of course, when it contracts, it goes down. So at this, what they're basically saying, and this is Kyle Davies, right, the partner at Three Arrows Capital. So he's coming out, and this is Suju's partner. We were all playing poker against the house. Well, they looked at our cards and used our money to bet against us, right? So Suju says something of the same. He says, wait, so Alameda's Dan Friedberg's previous business, Ultimate Poker, was literally looking at clients' whole cards to then steal money from them, right? So it looks like this has been going on for a little while. Petrify TGC, right, explains in his own forensic audit that it was the same, right? It was all pickoffs and just terrible trade venue, and wasn't working, right? Wasn't working. And so that's how they lost all their money, right? So right away we can start to see that the banking sector and finance had a totally different perception of what was going on. This was sophisticated traders. These were people who should have more robust strategies that were convinced they were winning all the time. And there's a psychological component to that, right? It fit their worldview. They were good professional traders, winning every time. Didn't understand that it was actually the bull market that made everyone look beautiful and wealthy and successful, right? The minute the conditions turned, people stayed on the venue but got picked off and were just being eaten alive. And now, when I first saw this, I didn't know what to make of it at first, right? So you see all this story right now. Sophisticated traders, who's losing money for real? My first feeling when I saw the list of like those gold-plated investors, right? Ontario Teachers Pension in Canada, all these big institutional names, Citadel, all these folks. What I saw was institutional money that got tricked and now was losing their money, right? So now, how do I know it's only that? Well, it turns out they had no Bitcoin on their balance sheet. At first, I didn't really know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. All of my instincts said it was a good thing for the overall industry that they didn't actually have Bitcoin. Turns out I'm totally right, right? They had paper Bitcoin. They were never selling you Bitcoin. They were selling you claims on Bitcoin they had never bought, right? So right away to see the contrast between what Bitcoiners think of in banking, we can't see flows, it's not transparent, we can't count the money, all financial engineering obfuscates what's really going on in the system. What should be simple is papered over with complexity. And now we have the truth, right? This whole financial engineering scheme was just another typical third-party system, right? It was typically what everyone in Bitcoin has been railing against for years. So right away we see the now focus on self-custody, the focus on having to control your own keys. Now go back in time. Remember the last bear market, the summer of 2019. And well, the spring of 2019, and then there was a bit of a jump because Facebook launched its project, right? And that just brought attention to the industry, and everyone started saying, oh, what's this Facebook coin, and da 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 da. But instantly it created hearings in DC, which I went to. I organized a little event that got the people, you know, to come out that were witnesses. And if you remember this hearing, right, it was all about cryptocurrencies, and it was all about what Facebook's coin was going to do. But contrast ended up happening and winning the day. It was a very famous testimony from Meltem Demirors, who went in front of that hearing and was able to create the contrast between Bitcoin and shitcoins. And she said shitcoins on the record, and that was shocking. So that was part of the contrast, right? But if you remember, if you weren't around at the time, what you have to remember is all of people's impressions after that event were, wow, Bitcoin looked really good after those hearings, right? I expect more of that. Right. So again, I expect more of that. The focus currently on self-custody, the focus currently on not repeating the same mistakes that the fiat legacy system created and absorbing those into the Bitcoin economy were a mistake and shouldn't be repeated. So there's a lot of awareness going around about that right now, which I think is a good thing. And that's that contrast again, right? Now, we can also take a look at the politics, right? What about politics? Well, yesterday we had a meeting between President Biden and President Xi of China in Bali, right? So they had a meeting yesterday. That's the Chinese characters and that's the US flag. And Xi said to Biden, knock off democracy versus autocracy talk, right? Knock it off. Stop doing that, right? Stop making a contrast between your democracy and our autocracy. And he went on to say, we have Chinese-style democracy that fits for Chinese people. And America has American-style democracy that's good for American people, right? Well, put all of that into context about what's happening today in the American electoral system, right? So he said, don't talk about democracy and autocracy. Don't create that contrast, right? We're the same, right? Now, Bitcoiners who understand system design, who understand verifiability, auditability, accountability, all of these things that are really important to Bitcoiners, right? Really important to Bitcoiners. We understand trade-offs in system design. We talked about it yesterday, right? We talked about the design of the electoral system in Arizona being a conscious choice, right? They chose ease of use for voters against the credibility of the system, right? So if you extend it to make it easier for everyone to vote, there's a trade-off. We talked about it in terms of even engineering design of a blockchain, right? Because we talked a little bit about Zuko's trilemma yesterday, and that there are three factors that come into the balance of creating these systems: human readability, right? How easy it is to use, how decentralized it is, and how secure it is. And if you pull on one angle, right, any engineer will tell you, you have to give up in another way. You can't have it all. There is no option where you get a election system that is ease of use and anyone can vote and see it, and delivers an instant result that's credible. You don't get that choice. You get either instant result that's credible because you've simplified the system yet made it harder for some people to participate, as in they have to bring ID or whatever else it is, or you make it easy for people to vote and you give up the credibility, right? So, and this isn't a Democrat-Republican indictment. Republicans did that in Arizona too, right? So this is not a left and right situation, right? This is not politics adhering to the contrast of blue and red. They're the same, right? So when I see Xi telling Biden, cut the democracy versus autocracy talk, right? Well, what does that do? It actually blends them together, right? It actually makes American political system, given everything that's going on today, right? And when Xi says, you know, quit the autocracy versus democracy talk, well, I say, you're right, Xi. Way to go, Xi. All right, you're right. You're right. And I think most Americans are getting there, right? Most Americans are going to say, well, is there a difference between the Chinese system and the American system as of today, as far as our own electoral enfranchisement? Now, not everyone will agree with that, but a huge portion of Americans, far more than 4 years ago, far more than 6 years ago, far more than 8 years ago, not even in the same universe as 12 years ago, right? Not even in the same universe, as far as people who think that the American system is as robust democratically as it was. Now, I'm in total agreement with the result of this election. I think it shows American democratic resilience in certain ways, right? This cut down the middle approach where they're not going to get anything done now because it's so divided, which I like, right? I'm for that. So I'm not complaining about the result. I'm merely underlining people's impressions and the loss of contrast between America and China, right? It's the loss of contrast that I'm talking about. Now, with the loss of contrast between America and China becoming a reality, with those two systems sort of blending in some people's eyes, right? And some people, I'm not describing everyone, I'm describing some people, myself included in those people, right? I'm one of those people. And so when I look at that contrast being lost between America and China, now I'm no fan of the CCP, and I'm not actually comparing the CCP to even the Democrat Party or Americans. You know, there's still a total different world. I'm talking about the contrast, right? I'm talking about the contrast. Now, put Bitcoin politics next to that, right? Now, put Bitcoin in general next to that contrast between red and blue, right? Like, how many more people think we're going to vote our way out of trouble in America, right? Are we going to vote our way out of trouble? Are we going to get a boomer leader who's really charismatic and inspires the people to be better? No, I don't think so, right? I don't think so. So we've got all these stories now, right? We've got, it looks like Katie Hobbs is going to win in Arizona, right? It looks like Kari Lake is going to lose. I mean, she's already being pressured into admitting she lost, and I think the other girl who ran the elections, right? The girl who ran the elections is now already saying she's governor, right? She's declaring herself the winner. And if you question it, right? If you question it, well, you're a conspiracy theorist and you're an idiot, and you can't even question the design choices that were made, right? No. They made a design choice that was good for ease of use, even though it subtracted from the credibility of the election. But you can't. That's unacceptable criticism, according to some, right? According to some. So, I mean, Kari Lake, she literally never campaigned. Sorry, Katie Hobbs never campaigned, right? She never debated, didn't do anything, and she's going to win, right? Against a once-in-a-generation talent who was super popular and everyone seemed to love, Kari Lake. Right? Now, she could lose. I mean, all of these things can be tricked in the sense that, you know, because people loved her so much, they came out to her shows. But Newtonian third law, right? I'll admit that there is an absolute worldview where it is totally credible that as many people came to love her and be excited about her candidacy, was met with an equal amount of people who hated her and were motivated to vote against her. So that falls within my worldview, and I would not be surprised if that was the case, right? I can see a credible scenario where she loses. It's credible, right? There is a credible scenario where Kari Lake loses and Katie Hobbs wins, right? But I'm not the forensic auditor of what's going on down there. When I just look at it, I say, doesn't seem very credible to me. Right? You know, that's just me weighing the probabilities and all that. But again, the effect is that our system, when compared to what Xi said about America and China, cut out the contrast between democracy and autocracy, well, Xi's right. Right? Xi is right. We got to go with Xi on this one, right? Xi has it right on, right? Here's Justin. We can vote our way out. Fetterman, yeah. This is, don't forget, this is the Fetterman 2024 for president official first news channel that endorses him, supports him. We're going to back that campaign all day long, right? I won't donate any Bitcoin or anything like that to the campaign. Give me a break. But I'll give him air cover. You know, we're here to cover that whole candidacy. We want it, right? The only thing better than the guy with the dementia brain is the new guy with the stroke brain. I want stroke brain more. What I want to see is them in like a trivia for president, right? Jeopardy for president. Fetterman and Biden would be great, right? But here's the best contrast that we could have ever hoped for. Here's the best contrast we could have ever hoped for in Bitcoin, and it happened yesterday. It happened yesterday. So we've got the political situation, we've got Xi, we've got the finance situation. Oh, let me just complete the thought on the finance situation, right? I think it was only institutions that lost money. I mean, a few depositors, sure, but I don't think it's any of our pleb friends. I don't think Bitcoiners, the ones who have taken the mental leap to changing the whole world, who understand that this is not something, you know, I bet you everyone who lost money, I bet you everyone who lost money in FTX are the type of people who say this, right? The type of people who say this. When are you going to sell your Bitcoin? Right? You know, the people who tell you, you know, when are you going to sell? Right? And then you look at them and you go, what the fuck are you talking about? What are you talking about? Right? Now there's a gulf there, right? There's a major gulf. Bitcoiners, of course, once you've taken the mental leap, you know, what do you sell into, right? We're here for the revolution. Now, it's nice when the exchange rate for the US dollar is high and it's a big party and and we like it and we comment on the price in US dollars regularly, but there's still a mental gulf, right? When people said to me, "Oh, you didn't sell your Bitcoin at the top, right? You didn't cash out. When are you going to cash out, right?" And then you know the look you give them, like, "What the fuck's wrong with you, buddy? Like, don't you know what I'm doing here, right?" I think it was all people like that who lost in FTX. That's what I think. I think it's still people who see the world in dollars, might have had a bit of Bitcoin, right? Might have bought some Bitcoin off them, but they're not Bitcoiners, right? They haven't taken the mental leap yet, right? So I see all of these folks, the icky guys, right? Travis Kling's thing as, you know, you should have known better. I don't have any handkerchiefs for you, right? If all these people want to go and play this game on FTX, which they did, which they should have understood from the start, it was a, you know, anyone who gives FTX that much benefit of the doubt when it was apparent to anyone from the outside, and I'm a little more specialized because I had this job early market sizing a competitor that was FTX, so I had a lot of insight. I think most passersby knew it was a scam if you had been trained in the arts of Bitcoin, right? If you'd been a Bitcoiner, there was no doubt it was a scam. None of us for a second thought that this was a credible thing. Right now, the extent to which it was a fraud was news. The extent to which it was a fraud was news, but no one would have been that interested in using a platform or anything. That's why there is always the hold your own keys and all that stuff, right? So, but here's the good news, right? Here's the amazing, I gotta add one more about the elections. So, you know, the Lauren Boebert girl, right? A bunch of money was spent to beat her in Colorado. She's a really big MAGA person. You know, she's got a bunch of kids. She's quite pretty in her own way, I think. And I think a lot of people are into that because she's, you know, political women, I guess. And so tons of money went in. And it looked like she was going to pull it out anyway, right? So there was the election night, maybe not. And then a few days, maybe it looked like it was leaning towards her. But now all of a sudden, Newsweek reports Lauren Boebert in danger as thousands of votes for opponent initially rejected for signature verification could be fixed as of today, right? As of today. Okay. Yeah, and she likes her guns. Yeah, Dickensis. Yeah, she came from like a bar where they allow the waitresses to carry firearms. So that's, I think, how she was initially very popular. The first time she ran in the campaign, she was still bartending in this bar with packing heat. So somehow it made a viral picture and she became sort of an icon of what she is. And I think she's entertaining as heck, right? I think she's got a career in being able to get under people's skin in, you know, the right way and drive them crazy. So that falls into this bucket. But here's the major orange pill that happened yesterday, right? And everyone's talking about it. So you'll know what I'm talking about immediately. It's the New York Times article. So we're doing contrast again, right? Contrast. So remember, the political order, countries, right? Contrast fading. The contrast now becomes between Bitcoin. The contrast is getting lost between Republicans and Democrats in some ways, right? Because the connection is the electoral system. The connection is politics, right? The uniparty we hear a lot about, right? The uniparty, that the Republicans and Democrats at a certain level are the same thing. Trump broke that, brought contrast, but there's a lot of people trying to put Humpty Dumpty back together and reform this unitary party. But with the elections as they are, with Xi giving great advice to Biden, right? Cut out the contrast, right? I think the contrast is forming anew for Bitcoiners, right? We are the contrast now, which is good, right? That's where we want to be. We want to be the contrast to what happened before, right? So now the New York Times comes out, and here's what they say, right? So they wrote one of the most absurd puff pieces on SBF that you could even imagine. So first of all, here's Trung Fan, who goes in and broke the piece down. And a lot of people have done this, right? So this is the word count in New York Times puff piece on FBS. Fraud count, 0. The number of times the word fraud was used, 0. Enron, 0. Crime, 0. Illiquid, 0. Stolen, 0. Hidden, 0. Criminal, 0. Backdoor, 0. He's getting sleep, 1. Right? So they throw a bunch of empathy his way in this article, right? This is like kind of a glowing article of him. Here's Austin Alfred, who's saying the New York Times, in the same article, tries to sort of blend over Coinbase and SBF in this sense, or FTX, right? Where they criticize Brian Armstrong for layoffs at Coinbase, while it's just another like trouble for the industry. They got layoffs at Coinbase and then FTX defrauded some people, right? They kind of equivocate them, right? Here's another one, right? This is from 1492 ETH, right? Who says, our institutions fail us often. FTX put the nail in the coffin. New York Times writes glowingly, we now rely on citizen journalism and self-custody, right? So that's that contrast again, right? So it's going all over. There was beaming articles written in, beaming articles written all over the place, right? But nevertheless, Wall Street Journal uses the word criminal. CNBC said the word illegal, right? But nothing of the sort happened in the New York Times article. We've got now even this piece here, right? So the article even did one other thing that is, I don't know how to qualify it, right? So everyone talking yesterday about this thread that SBF wrote, right? So it's what? And then he writes a series of emails, one every couple of hours, HAPPENED, right? What happened? And everyone immediately making the connection to Hillary Rodham Clinton's book about the 2016 election, what happened, right? Where we know there was all kinds of collusion up and down, Russia collusion, right? All this kind of stuff. Whether, I'm not even saying who did what right now. I'm just saying the book is about Russia collusion, right? And the election, right? So I'm not saying who colluded, blah, 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 right? Russia collusion and the title of the book. So he writes what happened, right? Obviously, everyone making the connection to all of his Democrat money, all the Democrat donations, the money laundering, the Glenn Greenwald worldview, where Ukraine is really just a perpetual war to create the money laundering system to replace what was going on in Afghanistan, which is the worldview of Julian Assange, right? Julian Assange, the worldview he shared with Afghanistan was the whole thing was a scam. No one gave a shit about the war on terror. It was really just a big money laundering operation, and when it got closed down by Trump, they needed another perpetual war, and they chose Ukraine, right? So this is Glenn Greenwald and Julian Assange's point of view, right? That's what they say. And a lot of people think that SBF's note was an allusion to that. But the New York Times decided to, as it was being written, they did the thing that we've talked about on this show called astroturfing, right? Astroturfing. It's when you put down a false narrative in front of a story so that it's already pasted over. We talked about astroturfing when it came to all of these warnings about the US election and vote count taking days, right? Which we now see. So now they can explain away the days because they've already said it was there, right? It was going to happen. So that to expect it, right? So that's astroturfing, right? So they astroturfed this whole cryptic "what happened" thing, and what they said was, "Oh, he was just doing it for fun, and there was no meaning to it as it was happening," which could be true. I can't mind read SBF. I can't mind read him. Maybe he was just fucking around. Maybe, right? But nevertheless, people made the connection, right? And the contrast is there. So the big thing that ended up happening is exactly what this 1492 guy said, right? Everyone reacting to the New York Times article is getting orange pilled as we speak. Do you know that there were still Bitcoiners who thought the New York Times was a credible news institution? Right? There were still people who believed that. There were still people who believed the New York Times was in the business of informing you about what's going on in the world. Could you imagine, right? Now we've got Elon Musk who's jumping into this whole story, right? Elon Musk jumping into this whole story and saying that the ratings in this simulation are the best, right? Because he's saying, how could so many stories come together? We've got Russia collusion, we've got Dem donors, we've got all this stuff, just Ukraine, everything coming into one easy timeline. And Elon Musk saying this is clearly the simulation delivering some kind of a narrative to us, right? And in any way that's important, we see again Bitcoin citizen journal. That's what we're doing here, right? We're doing citizen journalism here, right? And I'd say if you were following the SBF story, you've had the best coverage going on this show, right? We haven't missed anything, and we've given you a frame from the minute it broke that was consistent, coherent. We haven't been changing our minds every 2 minutes, right? We've been saying exactly what we're saying today for the past few days, right? We've been talking about synchronicity. We've been talking about how the simulation had to have created this story. There's just too much going on, right? It's too good for any other scenario. So we've been following that here, and I think you've had a better vantage point to judge all of this stuff. It's been a week now than any other mainstream media outlet, and it's not even close, right? They're just catching up, right? So more and more people are going to turn to it, right? But that's not the end of it. Thankfully, that's not the end of it, right? The other contrast is coming, and this is the most important one, right? This is the most important one. This one comes with all the ESG stuff, right? This one comes with all the ESG stuff. And it turns out the New York Times is still advertising an event in just a couple of days, right? November 30th, the Deal Book Summit, where Sam Bankman-Fried is on the list of speakers, right? Guess who he's with? He's with Sue Chu, the CEO of TikTok, right? TikTok, that's a credible company there. Oh yeah, we got Larry Fink, the chairman and CEO of BlackRock, right? He's great. So it's him. And then we got Andy Jassy, the president and CEO of Amazon, right? That guy's great. These guys are awesome, right? These are all the guys telling us about what we should do with energy and what we should do with ESG and how we should be investing our money with them because they're the only ones who know how to get environmental, social, governance considerations teased out of our hard-earned money. So these folks are, here to tell us that all kinds of shit is gonna be different, and the whole system is gonna be different, and we're gonna be having windmills and solar panels and all that crap, right? So contrast that with the actual cold weather coming, the actual trouble that people are having with the cost of energy and supply chains falling apart and inflation wreaking havoc on demand and supply of all kinds of things in the world, right? Now, this opens up people's minds to what's possible, to what can be different. And I can't think of a better thing to have happened, right? You've even got Vitalik now, Vitalik, jumping in and defending SBF for 2 or 3 days, right? He's been defending him. He said we should love him, the person, right? The person deserves love, he said, right? Yeah, he's right. Vitalik's right about that. But here's him defending the effective altruism gang. He says, automatically downgrading every single thing SBF believed is an error. True. It's important to actually think and figure out which things contributed to the fraud and which things didn't. Don't be the guy who would have tried to cancel vegetarianism in 1945. So Vitalik here is suggesting that he's a fraudster, right? This guy's a fraudster, but he's got some good qualities, and we should try and learn from him. We should try and see what we shouldn't destroy and make fun of and hate before we go on with our lives, right? Well, of course, again, Vitalik, one of the worst takes going, right? And this reminds me of the time Vitalik was, promoting the no victims in the case of, I won't be able to say the words on a live stream. This is on YouTube, but when children, pictures, internet, no crime, you get it, right? So he said that once, right? You understand he said that once. So this is him again, overcomplicating everything his eyes touch. Everything he looks at has to become a large description of physics and mathematics. He can't just look at a pipe and say it's a pipe, right? So we see a lot of projection here. It's projection again. And what it means, we don't know. But Vitalik is clearly taking sides now. He's not going to be able to hide anymore between I'm a crypto guy, I'm anti-state. He's going to have to either embrace what's going on or reject it, right? So he's trying to come up the middle like he's doing the past couple of days is going to cause him a lot of trouble, right? So the good news is this is going to continue to create this cleavage in the industry. And we might finally be rid of these parasites for real, right? Because contrast is going to force everyone onto one side or the other. Right? Everyone is going to be forced onto one side or the other here. Whether you like it or not, some people are going to be dragged to the side they don't want to be on, especially if it's the ESG, government, third-party, proof of stake crowd, right? He's preparing his own downfall. That's what I'm seeing, hyper-Bitcoinization. That's what I'm seeing. Yeah, this is astroturfing. That's what I'm seeing. Now, I'm not sure, right? I don't. I've met Vitalik a bunch and don't think him to be a premeditated criminal in any sense, right? But people change, and who knows what kind of logic you have if you've been telling lie upon lie for years, right? So we'll see what happened with the merge. I've been noticing it in his language since before the merge. His last explanation of what the merge was all about was pure confusopoly, and his even vocabulary that he manipulates in the confusopoly has been limited. He can't, he's stuck using common words and trying to pump new meaning into them. I think one of them was like human, what were one of the things he said? What were one of the things he said? Oh, shoot, Dikenzas. Oh, shoot, I'm in a Bitcoin max regime. Yeah, get out of here. Beat it. Scram, idiot. We don't want you around here. We're not here to talk about Ethereum's merge. Like, scram, get out of here. So yeah, Vitalik is going to have a lot to answer for, right? And whether he has to answer for it, who knows, right? Whether he has to answer for it, who knows? I don't know. So that's it. Contrast. And I think ultimately this energy argument is where we're going to be able to really put the wedge in people's heads to understand what is different. What I like to say, and it's a kind of euphemism, but it works, right? Vitalik took the energy out of Ethereum. He did. When he made it go proof of stake, he took the energy out, right? With the energy gone from Ethereum, it's just a matter of time. That's what I see, right? It's a matter of time. And if we get that thing on the ropes, we'll be that much better off. That's what I think. That's what I think, right? So that's it. Contrast. We need it. We love it. It helps us, right? The more craziness that goes on today, the more the lines of where contrast is drawn is going to be clear and will help us, right? So every way that I see this con man falling, to me, it brings contrast that'll help us, right? And we need the contrast. It's no more these vague ideas of crypto and this and that, right? This is Bitcoiners' chance to exit, really exit all of these schemes and scams and really put some distance between us and those that would use the name, those that would use the brand, those that would use the ideas to subvert and trick and fool and manipulate and hypnotize, right? We're not going to let them do it anymore. And that's the good news. That's the good news. So closer than ever, hyper-Bitcoinization on the doorstep. That's how I see it. All right. I hope Dickens' ass dragged his ass out of here. Snowden back to talking about Bitcoin. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, we're D-Day, guys. It's us. Right? We're D-Day. They don't have a choice. We don't have a choice. It'll be fun. We're going to storm the beach, guys. It's going to be great. Patterns. But yeah, just patterns, right? I'm not here to say I know what they're thinking. There's no mind reading going on. I don't know what Vitalik is thinking. I don't. I'm not going to say I do, right? All I know is we love the contrast and just keep layering it on, right? All these people going on about the New York Times. Do you imagine how many sophisticated, smart people that were sort of 1 foot in Bitcoin and still would read the New York Times with any amount of credibility? Could they still do that tomorrow? I think it's over. I think the Gelman amnesia effect that the New York Times relies on will be broken because of this, right? By astroturfing what happened and all of that stuff, you're in big trouble. That's what I see. All right, team. Peace. See you tomorrow.